Welcome to the Creative Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Lopez Jr. Follow us on Twitter at CreativeCoach47 and on YouTube at Creative Coaching Podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks a bunch for listening.
Hey!
Welcome to the podcast, Coach.
Appreciate you having me on, Mike.
No, Coach, I appreciate you so much for taking the time and making the time to be with us. It's been a couple of years now that I've been kind of, hey, Coach, and we're finally getting it done, man. And I appreciate you being so gracious to accept the invitation and jumping on with us. Now, Coach, I want to ask you, the first question I ask every guest, Coach, is how are you introduced to the game of basketball?
Well, I was introduced to the game of basketball in a super unique, fashion because my dad was a basketball coach. From an early age, the first time I remember it is just going to my dad's games when he was the head coach at Ashland, a small college in Ohio, and then he eventually took the job when I was in fourth grade at the University of Minnesota. So, my weekends were going on Big Ten road trips during the week. I'd finish school in elementary school, and then my mom would drop me off at the University of Minnesota, and I'd watch my dad's late afternoon practice and then go up to his office while he and his staff watched film, and then go home and start it all over the next day. So that's really how I was introduced to the game in a very unique manner. Was always a ball boy, always wanted to be a ball boy in the opposing team's locker room so I could watch the other coach, what he did pregame, postgame, and halftime. Knew at a really, really young age that I wanted to coach.
That's great, Coach. Now, that being the case, your dad, Bill Musselman, legendary coach, and I know a lot of people know that name really well. Was it kind of, when you were learning the game under him, was it like felt a little bit of pressure because of that, in the sense that my dad's a coach, I feel like I need to be better at this game or know more about it?
I would say that, fourth grade to eighth grade, no pressure at all. And actually ninth grade, no pressure at all. And then we moved to Ohio from San Diego. We moved to San Diego when I was in maybe sixth grade and then left San Diego once the ABA folded, and my dad got the Cleveland Cavalier job. So it was at that point, that I felt pressure as a 10th grader playing varsity basketball on a really, really great high school team in Ohio, and my dad being the Cavs coach, and it was hard for sure. A lot of pressure. I think the other thing too is, you go to youth camps, and with your dad being a coach, your basketball IQ is, expected to be at a high level as well.
Yeah, I'm positive that's the case. Yeah, Coach, I want to ask you, what was your experience with those who coached you coming up? Because that helps us to get a lens and a view of how we view coaching, even ourselves. Because they say sometimes we coach how we were coached, right? What was your experience with those who coached you as you were coming up?
Yeah, so I had an absolutely incredible junior high coach. My junior high coach was a great football player. His name was Earl Faison, and he played for the San Diego Chargers. He was a gym teacher and did not know much about basketball, but I begged him to start a junior high team, which he was nice enough to do it. He didn't teach us really anything about basketball, but he taught us a lot about being a good teammate, about work ethic. So that's my first, real memory of having a coach in seventh and eighth grade that was super, super impactful. To me, he was, a big, intimidating figure. But somebody that, for sure had a huge impact, on my life as a player, and then influenced me as a coach. And then I had two different high school coach. One of them was Biff Lloyd at Brecksville in Ohio. And he influenced me a lot. He coached the game kind of the opposite of my dad. We were a fast break team. We were a team that ran the numbered break, tried to outscore people. He was way, way ahead of his time offensively. We had great teams at Brecksville. Tom Tupa, who played in the NFL, was a high school teammate.
Wow.
Scott Roth was a high school teammate. Scott ended up playing in the NBA, and now he's one of the best coaches in the world. He's coaching a team in Australia and just got the Australian Coach of the Year award in their professional league. And
Wow.
and then Ralph DeSantis was another. He coached me my last year in high school, and so I was around three super impactful, great coaches at a young age. And then both my college coaches, Jim Bravelli and Hank Egan, both coached me at the University of San Diego, and were heavy influences in different areas. I think we all pick up different things from coaches that influence us. With Jim Bravelli, he was super cool. His demeanor was very calm. He was great at preparations. He was unbelievable in timeouts during the game. And then Hank Egan was a phenomenal coach and did a great job preparing us in practice and scouting reports on the opposing team. Coach Egan was phenomenal at.
So, Coach, looking back at all that, I guess acumen that you came from, right? The coaching acumen. Who would you say you kind of patterned yourself after, or who do you coach more like throughout that lineage right there, Coach?
Well, for sure, my dad.
Yeah.
And it was just because I saw my dad coach so many games and so many practices. But then once you start, your own career. My first job out of college was working for the LA Clippers. I started off in ticket sales and then eventually was an assistant player personnel director. And I got the ability, 1 year out of college to scout local colleges and help with the draft preparation. But the head coach at the time was Gene Shue. And Gene Shue was an unbelievable coach. He had some great assistant coaches like Don Casey on staff. And then you start your own career, and I think you're influenced heavily by the people you worked with or worked for. And, when I look at my career, having spent, time with Chuck Daly, Doc Rivers, Mike Fratello, I've been around, so many great coaches, Hubie Brown, and then some of the people that I worked with. When I was with Sacramento, Scotty Brooks was an assistant coach, and I worked with Tom Thibodeau when we both worked under my father with the Timberwolves, and David Fisdale was an assistant coach for us, and Keith Smart. So just been around so many great coaches that have all had some impact and an influence on me without a doubt.
Coach Brooks, you mentioned Coach Brooks. I got to spend some time with him here at Summer League, and phenomenal person. I had knowing him from the league prior to that, playing the game, and you see him now as a coach, and you just think, yeah, that's right. He belongs there, especially with that staff. It's great to have a staff like that. Nate McMillan, him. You got guys that can head coach it at any time, anywhere. So, yeah.
The greatest story, Mike, about Scotty Brooks is, and you brought up that you got to spend time around him at Summer League. When I graduated from the University of San Diego, before I landed a job with the Clippers, I actually got the job at the Summer League. And at that time, it was at LMU at Loyola Marymount. And I sat next to Barry Hecker. And Barry was a player personnel director for the Clippers. And I sat next to him for a week straight at games. And then he ended up that was my first foot in the door for my first job. But, there was a time at the Summer League where I watched Scotty Brooks play on a free agent team. He had just graduated from UCI Irvine, and he was playing against the Russian national team. My dad was coaching the Albany Patroons of the old CBA, which is equivalent to the G League. Yeah. And I called my dad and said, hey, I just watched a guy drop 40-some points against the Russian national team. His name is Scotty Brooks. And lo and behold, my dad ended up drafting Scotty while he was with the Albany Patroons. And then a couple other guys played for my dad from that Irvine team. Johnny Rogers and Todd Murphy also played for my dad. But Scotty was an unbelievable player. And you're right, when you put together a staff and you have guys like Scott Brooks and Nate McMillan, like the Lakers currently do, super, super special.
Yeah, no, phenomenal. Not only that, because you have former players along that staff, because that's, to me, that's the model the NBA is going to. Former players are going to become the head coaches just because of the adjustment of the different generations coming up. They want that kind of, I guess, to be able to see eye to eye with them in a sense.
Yeah, I think, Mike, that there's a great benefit to being a former player and then getting into coaching, and you look on the staff that we have at USC with Earl Boykins and Will Conroy. I mean, those two guys both played professionally, and so I think that they can lend a perspective that's different. And I saw that with Doc Rivers, the impact that Doc could have. And when I worked with Atlanta Hawks, I saw how Rick Mahorn, as a former player, could really impact, players. But, I think the key is with former players that get into coaching is that, those that have great success, like Doc Rivers and Scotty Brooks, and those guys have great work ethic that not only they had as players, but then also as coaches. And I see that with our own guys and Coach Conroy and Coach Boykins as well.
Yeah, work ethic, being students of the game, and then knowing how to teach the game, because sometimes the best players don't always make the best coaches, right? And so I think that's a great thing, Coach. I appreciate you kind of laying that out. Now, as far as the profession, because coaching in the profession, knowing what you had the road ahead of you, your dad could give you that firsthand information. What influenced you to go into the actual profession itself? Like, you knew the grind was going to be the traveling, recruiting. Who influenced you to say, hey, yeah, if you're ready to do it, just jump in?
Well, so I worked for the Clippers, and then my next job actually was to be a general manager of the Rapid City Thrillers at obviously a super young age. And the first thing I had to do was hire a coach as a GM. And we hired Phil Flip Saunders.
Wow.
Flip was actually an assistant coach at the time at the University of Tulsa. But my father told me, hey, hire somebody you're comfortable with, hire somebody that you can partnership with, that you can have great synergy. And Flip had been somebody that I had always looked up to. I tried to emulate Flip's shooting form when he played for my dad. And so to make a long story short, Flip then went to lacrosse after 1 year in Rapid City to be the head coach there. And it was actually our owner, a guy by the name of Pat Hall, that told me that he thought I was ready to become a head coach, even though I was 23 or 24 years old at the time.
Wow.
I was super nervous. My dad gave me the greatest advice on roster building. He told me to try to get as many Indiana players that had played for Coach Bobby Knight and as many UNLV players that had played for Jerry Tarkanian. And he said, if you can get a mix and a blend of those two players that had played under those two legendary coaches, the team will be able to self-coach itself. And that's what I did. I went out and got 3 players from Indiana, 3 players from UNLV. And that's what ended up happening. I didn't really know what I was doing, but we had a phenomenal first year and won at a 70% clip. And it obviously wasn't things that I knew. It was having great leadership inside the locker room, having maturity inside the locker room, and having players that understood what it took to win at a high level. So that's the first, kind of leap or jump. It was having an owner that had watched me work as a general manager and had talked basketball with me for a full year, who had belief that at a young age I could do it. And then being surrounded by a locker room that kind of protected me at a young age, and got my, career jump started with having a couple really good winning records at a super young age.
I think it'd be good for some people to take that advice, right? Seeing as from the college game to the pro game, guys that are already, I guess, programmed, if you will, how to play the game without having a ton of instruction during the game. At practice, obviously, they got the business from their coaches, and things were drilled into them. But you look at the mix of the two. Indiana playing a very structured type of ball, UNLV playing a different type of structured ball. Bringing those two together seems like a perfect recipe for what we see now. I think that was kind of the future of basketball, even at that time. Looking at that.
No, it was really important because, and again, it was my dad's vision of telling me, hey, you don't know what you're doing. You're too young. You're too inexperienced. So you've got to have an experienced locker room. And him understanding that Coach Knight's players understood how to execute in the half court, understood the 5-man, 5-out passing game that he had, and then Coach Tarkanian's team that was much better. And his players were used to playing in transition and then picking up full court defensively. And the blend of the two really, really helped me get off to a good start.
I'll say that's fantastic, Coach. Great advice from your dad. That was, I think it speaks to the game of basketball and how relationships are everything. I mean, from getting jobs to how you operate your team, how you operate your club, whatever you're doing, relationships are everything. So I guess the moral of the story, don't burn bridges because people won't be willing to help you out later, right?
Well, my dad grew up with Bobby Knight.
Wow.
Coach Knight grew up in Orrville, Ohio. My dad grew up in Worcester, Ohio. My dad's first game in the Big Ten was playing against Indiana, and that was Bobby Knight's first game coaching in the Big Ten. It was
wow.
Score of the game was 52-51 Minnesota over Indiana. But that was Coach Knight's first game, believe it or not, coaching in the Big Ten. And then my dad and Coach Tarkanian were very close. And Jerry Tarkanian's son, Danny, went to law school at the University of San Diego, and I was going there. And then Coach Tarkanian's other son, George, actually we played together at the University of San Diego. So the advice my dad gave me was totally built not just on reputation, not just built on philosophical, but probably most importantly, it was built off the relationships of what I just mentioned.
Yeah, that's what this game is, Coach, in my mind. At the end of the day, I mean, what's that saying? It's not about the X's and O's, it's about the Jimmys and Joes, right? And so, you get a mix of both of those and you're perfect, right? As far as your experience in the game. Now, I want to ask you, Coach, about if you had a welcome to coaching moment within that experience, being a 24-year-old head coach. Do you have an experience where it's like, wow, this is it. I'm a coach. This is happening. It's a whole different role now.
Yeah, I think there's, I would say there's probably a couple different moments like that. Mm-hmm. The first one was, when you're coaching players that are a lot older than you, and Wes Matthews Senior, not Wes Junior, that's now an NBA player, but his dad was a great player, but was super challenging to coach. One of my first shoot arounds, Wes went to the other end of the floor, and shot jumpers while we were putting in our coverages. And so that was one of the first moments that it was like, okay, so this is a challenge. Mm-hmm. Coaching it can be difficult. Yeah. And then I think all of us, when you're put in a late game situation for the first time and you have to diagram a play, and the team is looking for your guidance. And then those are two moments that vividly stand out. And I think the other moment is coaching against my dad in the CBA.
Wow.
That was a kind of a wow. I'm doing this, against my idol, my best friend. Wow. And then I think maybe the moment that was the most emotional was when I got the job with the Golden State Warriors, and it was right before the press conference. And I was in the office that I was about to take over, and just kind of had to regroup and gather myself before the press conference, just thinking that my dad was not going to be there. Wow. To watch the press conference, and knowing that we were going to be the first father-son head coaches in the history of the NBA, and that could never be taken away. So that was another kind of aha moment. This is really happening.
That's fantastic, Coach. I mean, you hear about different experiences in life and how they impact us for a lifetime, right? And those sounds like moments that, yeah, they shape kind of who you are at the end of the day and who you're going to become. So that's great, Coach. Really good. Now I want to ask you about NIL, not specifically anybody or anything like that or processes, but your processes. How has NIL changed your approach, if at all?
Well, Mike, I think name, image, and likeness, and now revenue share has changed. I mean, you could go. It's great for the players. Obviously, it's great for young people to make money, which obviously schools are making money, and now players are partaking in that with revenue share. But the landscape has not adjusted like it has at the pro level. And what I mean by that is, look, we all know, I'm a big Major League Baseball fan. We all know that, the Dodgers and the Yankees are probably going to have the biggest payroll, right? And we can look and see what the shortstop, Mookie Betts, what his salary is for the Dodgers. And we all know what the salary is for Aaron Judge, who's playing for the New York Yankees. And any of us that follow baseball also understand that the Oakland A's have a limited payroll.
Yeah.
And because of that, the way that Aaron Boone, from a coaching perspective, or Doc Roberts is viewed as opposed to the manager of the Oakland A's, is different. That has not yet leveled out in college football, college men's basketball, and some of the other sports. And the reason I bring that up is it does impact winning and losing. How much revenue share somebody has, and so that's an area that's going to have to fall in line with what happens in other areas that where player salaries can affect the outcome of what seasons look like for coaching staffs and for programs or organizations. And I do think that, you've seen a change in college football, women's basketball, men's basketball, with the addition of general managers and how they can build out staffs. And maybe eventually it looks like, the NBA, where there's scouts that are partaking in recruiting much different than what we've seen in the past. So that's a kind of a question that you could, go on for hours and hours about how name, image, and likeness is. And then with the players too, like name, image, and likeness from what it was last year to now, where there's more guardrails, that's changed. And so that's going to have to be players are going to have to adapt to that, as well as coaches, as well as agents. So there's a lot of changing parts to this whole thing, and we're kind of learning on the fly. This will go down, 20, 30 years from now. This is, probably as fluid of a situation with rule changes as any coach in any sport could ever have to go through.
For sure. And I think a commissioner is probably on the horizon of some sort, some kind of governing body, to kind of see how things pan out. But yeah, it's like you said, learning on the fly, right? I mean, you probably know something I don't know, but maybe it's there already. But I think I ran into Coach Krzyzewski at Summer League too. Just said hi, bye, but I thought to ask him, are you going to be the new commissioner of the NCAA? I thought about asking, but I said, man, I better not. Not that he would even tell me, who am I, right? But yeah, I think he'd probably be somebody that they would look at for that. But in any event, I want to ask you, Coach, given the fact that we have NIL, revenue sharing, how money flows here and there, how fluid it is, like you stated, how important is it, even now, especially now, to have high character and have high integrity with your program?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think that goes with revenue share, with name, image, and likeness, and then without it as well. But I do think there's a certain maturity level, that's needed when you add in the fact that that money is now involved. Look, I mean, it's obvious when somebody like myself went to college, our post game meal was a pizza, or we got $5 if we didn't, if we didn't get the pizza that night, and then we, go buy a burrito somewhere. But you add in the fact of how much, like, does that change a player's work ethic? Does it change a player's will to win? Does it change a player's desire to get to the next level? You certainly want players that are driven internally to be the best they can currently, and then we want players that want to play basketball beyond college, whether that be the NBA, the G League, or overseas. And so, you certainly don't want revenue share or, name, image, and likeness to affect a player's, ability to want to get better on a daily basis.
Right. Super important, right? I guess the fidelity to what you're doing shouldn't change because of the money. I mean, obviously things do change, where you live, what you drive, your long-term financial portfolio, but what got you there is what's going to keep you there and take you to another level, I guess, is what you're saying with that. And when you have the high character and high integrity, that's how you stay. That's a staying power, right? Being a professional, not just a pro. So I think that's it's really important how you laid that out. Now, Coach.
Well, and Mike, on that same footnote, the guys that we have had that have gone on to do great things, mm-hmm. they wouldn't be changed by it if Moses Moody, the Anthony Blacks, the Cody and Caleb Martin, Nick Smith, those guys are that's why they're playing at the highest level. Even some of our guys that are playing overseas that have great lives right now, like JD Note. I mean, those guys are driven to be great, regardless of what the salary they're making, whether it be in the NBA or name, image, and likeness.
Whether you're a CEO or whatever it is, there's certain people who have a certain drive, and those are those guys that are cut of that fabric, that just go for it. And no matter, they do it for free, right? But they don't do it for free, but they would. They have that kind of passion. Now, Coach, I want to ask you about, because I know you go, like you mentioned, baseball, and you observe a lot of managers. You were recently with, the Cowboys, Jerry Jones, stuff like that, people like that, other organizations. When you observe them, Coach, what processes do you take from them and integrate into your own program?
Wow. Yeah. So, first of all, I watched my dad go through this same process. So, my dad was very close with Billy Martin, the former manager of the New York Yankees and the Oakland A's. And so I would watch those two talk about how to deal with the media. My dad was super, super close with Ballard Smith, who was the president of the San Diego Padres. And so I would watch those two sit in Ray Kroc's suite and talk about roster building. I remember when we moved to San Diego, came home from school, and Paul Brown, the former NFL legendary coach, was sitting at the dinner table with my dad, and they were talking about the very first team meeting, because my dad was going from the University of Minnesota to coach in the ABA. professionally. And my dad wanted to ask Coach Brown, like what was Paul Brown's philosophy on the first team meeting. So I got to see my dad learn from all these other sports figures. And then in my life, when I got fired from the Sacramento Kings, Michael Lombardi reached out, and he was with the Oakland Raiders at the time, and they actually gave me an office over with the Raiders where I could go watch basketball game film. But I ended up watching many of their practices and picking Michael Lombardi's brain on draft process. And one of my good friends was Kevin Towers. Kevin was the general manager of the San Diego Padres, and he allowed me to come and watch a couple different drafts, sit in the draft room. So I've always tried to learn different aspects from different coaches. A lot of our practice structure is now built off what I've seen at NFL practices. Yeah. I just feel like coaches at other sports seem to be more open, and more willing to share things. And so whether it be, going to football practice and watching the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh, and then hoping to be able to pick his brain pre-practice or post-practice. It's every time I go to a practice of another sport, I take away a whole bunch of things. And so it's been a big fabric of what we've tried to do, not just with me, but you mentioned going to the Cowboys practice, and then the Cowboys exhibition game. I brought Will Conroy, and Coach Conroy got the opportunity to sit with Jerry Jones and pick his brain. And wow. Those things are super important for not just myself, but our entire staff.
Yeah, they're invaluable, Coach. They're invaluable from the perspective of they say who the 5 people you surround yourself with the most, right? That's who you become, right? And if you can slowly but surely surround yourself from time to time with people like that, there's this kind of transfer of something. I can't say what it is, but maybe a mindset that changes perspective, a paradigm shift, so to speak. And I think that's really important to have other people surrounded in that you're working with, that are on your team, that are part of your organization, because then they get it. They get it even more so when they get a piece of that and get poured into, right?
When you get an opportunity, Mike, to talk to an owner of a professional sports team and their perspective on how to deal with the salary cap, how to deal with name, image, and likeness, how to deal with the revenue share number, those conversations can only make you a heck of a lot better. I can guarantee that.
Yeah, especially if you're a lifelong learner. It may not be the exact same space that they're in, but whatever space you're in, those principles still apply. And I think that's really important to be able to see that crossover. Now, Coach, I want to ask you about mentorship. How important has mentorship been for you throughout your career?
Oh, wow. Super important. I mean, we talked about, my first job and how my dad mentored me in what we should do with our roster building. And I mentioned Michael Lombardi already. I mean, to this day, if something, goes on with our team that I need to maybe, off-court discipline or something like that, I'll get an opinion of my mentors. And Mike Lombardi's been one. Phil Nevin, who played Major League Baseball and was the manager of the Angels. Phil is one of the guys that I look up to and try to get his opinion on things. So I think that finding 2 to 4 mentors, and they can change throughout your life. When I was younger, it was Chuck Daly, and then Pat Williams. Pat Williams was the president of the Orlando Magic and brought the Magic to Orlando, actually. And then as time goes on, you end up gaining other mentors. And so I don't think you just necessarily have to have one. I think that those can change, as you grow and get older as a coach as well.
That's great, Coach. Because you you go from one level to the next, maybe, right? You go from being assistant to a head coach to GM, or you go in reverse like you did, GM to coach, and whatever the case may be. And for each of those steps, you need some input from somebody who maybe has been in that role or had to oversee that role, and just another perspective, right? Two heads are better than one, as they say, and I think that's really important. I think you have to have that board of directors for your life, not just your profession, and guys be able to help you and speak into your life as well. Now, Coach, I want to ask you, what have you learned about yourself throughout your career? Because us as coaches, we're always teaching, we're always constantly pouring into people, but there's times where we have to, we sit back and think, what have I learned about myself? What have I done for me, I guess, in that sense? So I would ask you the same, Coach. What have you learned about yourself throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, just my thirst for knowledge and to get better. I think that any time that you can gain something from somebody else, I think that it why would that be? Like, not knowing you don't have all the answers, is super important to me. I mean, I could watch a person coaching my son in AAU and pick up a drill. I mean, Chris Warlow with MVP Flight has done things in practice 15 years ago with my son's team, and I've taken note and implemented it into a practice. So to me, I've learned that I want to get better every single day.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the thing that I've learned from myself. And then, surrounding yourself with people that are truthful, like whether it's my wife and trying to improve how I do a post-game interview, or whether it's a former player and trying to get feedback from them on things that they liked or things that they thought we could do a better job of. All those things become super, super important.
Yeah, no, even to the point where you get better at taking off your shirt after big wins, right, Coach?
Yeah, I need to get back. I need to get back to that. I haven't had that in the last 2 years. Hopefully I can celebrate another time in my life and rip that shirt off.
You'll be a little bit more tan now that you're in Southern California, so you'll be able to see a little bit more of those cuts. That's fantastic, Coach. Now, I want to ask you about your support system, because you mentioned your wife and how she helps you along the path, that you're on. How important has your support system been throughout your career?
No, it's super important. I mean, it's my wife's a huge influence. My two sons, who've both been on staff. My daughter, she sent a text, this year after a loss, that was super impactful and put things in perspective really, really quickly. About, hey, you're doing what you can. You're a hard worker. I see it. Keep your head up. I mean, that's coming from someone that was a freshman in high school. So, who's surrounded by your inner circle is a huge key to players. It's a huge key to coaches. It's a huge key to administrators. It's a huge key to front office personnel, people as well.
Yeah. Super important. I think that's sometimes where we lose sight of where did I get that from? Where did I come up with that? Because there's people influencing us daily. And so our support system helps us to stay sane sometimes and to remind us that, hey, it's not all about you. The world doesn't revolve around you, even though you think it does. And it seems like it does sometimes, right? Things are so good. Now, Coach, I want to ask you for coaches, because we talk a lot about players' mental health, obviously their physical health, because we want them in top condition, and then their emotional health. But how important is it for us as coaches, and especially at the college level and the pro level, who have so much more to lose, actually? How important is mental health, emotional health, and even physical health?
Well, I think it's important to the players. It's important to staff. It's important to, to the head coach. It is important. And, I know for a coach, for a head coach, his assistant coaches become, huge factors in, their body language, huge factor in, how positive are people on your own staff. That affects everybody on staff. So I think that, and especially as staffs have grown, you've got to become even more and more aware of that. I think everybody's for many years has talked about loyalty. Certainly, that's super important. But so is like the personalities fitting on a staff, just as the personalities are important in the locker room with the players, just as the personalities of the 5 players cohesively working together on the floor and those pieces fitting. All that stuff goes together, goes hand in hand.
Fantastic, Coach. Yeah. A holistic approach. People you like to use that word holistic because it's like a buzzword, but it really needs to be that approach when it comes to the human beings that you're working with every day and that you're relying on and you have to trust. It's really, really important to have those things in order, maybe not to perfection, but at least into operating order where everybody's on a good and even kind of keel, if you will. Now, I want to ask you, Coach, what is your why, Coach? Why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially at the collegiate level, you want to have an impact on student athletes and try to help them, prepare them for life. Everybody wants to, like if a guy is good enough to play in the NBA, you hope that by him coming to your program, you've prepared him as well as anybody could in the country to understand what it means to be a pro. If a player is done playing basketball and this is his last experience, have you helped prepare him for what the real world is like? Yeah. That's why I wanted to get involved in college. And then there's the, what about like personally too, what is the why of, I wanted to get involved in college. The why for that was, I want to have camaraderie with other coaches on campus. At Nevada, TJ Bruce, to this day, one of my best friends. He was the baseball coach at Nevada, now currently at Long Beach State. The relationships that I built, like at Arkansas with, the women's soccer coach, I learned a lot from it at Arkansas. So it's relationship building. That's a big part of the why. Relationships with players, relationships with current staff, and then relationship with staff members of other sports on campus.
Yeah, no, Coach, we started off talking about relationships and how much they matter. And here we are, right, at your why, and it comes back to relationships. And I think that's always got to be the focus for coaches in general, at any level, is to understand that when you're coaching these young men, young women, whoever it is, grown men, grown women, if you're building those relationships properly, they'll last a lifetime and they'll help build whatever you're trying to build, especially if you're relying on those people to build those things. Now, Coach, my last question is always about legacy, and you're not anywhere near done, so I'm not saying, hey, now you're out to pasture or anything, but I want to ask you, Coach, when your time with the game is done, what would you want to be said of you?
Oh, wow. Just that I've helped impact guys in a whole bunch of different ways. I think some of them we've already, kind of touched on, but I think that, I like my 2 college coaches, when I look back at the time that I played for them, I hope that, the stories, there should be stories about, from player to player, player to staff, staff to staff. I think all that stuff, I think everybody just wants to, kind of be remembered as somebody that gave back to the game all they could give. That you gave to the players all you could give, and that you gave to your current staff, all that you could give, and you maximized the time that you were with the player and the staff. I think those are some of the things that would be super important to me.
Fantastic, Coach. I really do appreciate it so much, making the time, taking the time. It's been phenomenal, as I knew it would be. That's why I didn't mind waiting so long. And I also want to shout out Brandon Chambers, because without him, I would have never connected with you. And that's my guy. I love him to death. And so I, here again, had to do that before we finish this, because I'd hate to get on his bad side. Right. So, which I don't think he has one, but
no, he's BC is one of the great coaches in our game, and that's a guy that loves to learn and is has an unbelievable work ethic as well.
He's a robot, that guy. A robot with real good emotions. Good guy. But thank you, Coach. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir.